Hello everyone. This is one of my newer quilts that I just finished quilting. It's mid-July 2021. I have to say that this quilt, when I got it, was one of the more creatively pieced quilts that I have ever gotten from a customer. And this video is pretty much about design choices, quilting design choices for quilts that are not pieced perfectly, or shall we say, very creatively. So I wanted to kind of give you my thoughts on how I approach this quilt. And first of all, let me say, every quilt, no matter how creatively pieced, deserves to be quilted. And we just got to pick the right designs to make it happen. So the things this quilt definitely does have going for it are all these beautiful embroideries. My customer is an absolute sweetheart, and she enjoys quilting, but she's older and maybe has eyesight issues. I'm just guessing here. But definitely she loves her embroidery machine. And these embroideries, I think she said, took her a couple years to complete. And then piecing them together was a whole nother story. So she did her best, bless her. She did a beautiful job. I love the embroideries. I love, love, love her color choices. But the piecing really made me chuckle. So again, I don't judge. Everybody quilts for a different reason, at a different skill level. And my thoughts are, if it gives you joy, do it, be proud of it, and share it with the world. And whoever gets this quilt is going to absolutely love it, because how can this not bring a smile to your face? I mean, it is just gorgeous. So how do you tackle all those inconsistencies? Well, number one, take the ruler plate off your machine so you can use your hands to kind of push and pull fabric out of the way just by the weight of your hand. And then choose designs that are curvy. So in this quilt, I first thought, well, your first inclination is treat each border separately. Couldn't do that in this quilt. The most eye-catching thing on here is that dark sashing. So I always start with, okay, how do I get this sashing nice and straight and, straight across? And let me tell you, it was a challenge. So I'd get this pinned down and nice and straight, and then I'd look over here and this would be all wobbly. And then I'd look over here and it would be going in all different directions. And long story short, I would line up one line and then it would distort another line. So I just decided, I'm going to quilt these outer borders, treat them as one. And there are a lot of these embroideries have these squirrels surrounded by these little tiny pebbles. So I'm thinking swirls and pebbles, and of course Beth Ann Nemish and her unique, wonderful design called Nemishing came to the rescue. So that's what I used on this outer border. And I think it just brings a delightful sense of movement, captures those swirls and those pebbles. Now this is really, really big quilting. I mean, some of these pebbles are the size of a nickel, which for pebbles, I think that's kind of big. So that helped me punch, and you can see little rip. There's a lot of fullness in all these borders, but this helped me pretty much hide it. And once my customer washes this quilt, it will just go away. It'll all shrink and poof, and it'll be perfect. It'll just go nicely. I mean, yeah. So then, so I actually did these borders first, and tacked and stitched in the ditch around both sides of all this sashing, because it's so predominant, had to be straight. They couldn't be wobbly. They couldn't go off in one direction or another. Those had to be straight, or the whole quilt would just look off. And I didn't want that for my customer. She put a lot of work into this, so I wanted to do the best that I could. So then the next thing I did, these open areas, these white embroidered areas, 1, 2, and 3, I did those next. I used, you can get Glide in a 50 weight, any 50 weight thread, because it's kind of in the background. Usually I use So Fine, but in this case I wanted to try out Habendash Filtech, the company Filtech, or if you buy wholesale, Habendash. They are the makers of Glide thread. And Glide is now available in a 50 weight version, which is very, very similar to So Fine. I don't know if you can see that. So I wanted to try it out, and I really, really do like it. So anyway, getting off track a little bit. What I did here is I stitched in the ditch around all the embroideries, outlined all of them, not the pebbles, but around I'll run around the feet and all the embroideries there. And then in the background, I just did a relatively loose stipple. Well, maybe not loose, but the density of the stipple was pretty much dictated by how much fullness was in these panels. So I didn't want to make it too thick, too dense, or too loose. Too dense, I didn't want to make it too dense because price was definitely a concern. So I certainly didn't want to do a micro stipple because that would have taken forever. But this looseness went rather quickly and did really good. I could have also done, your typical curvy backgrounds like swirls. I didn't use swirls because I already have lots of swirls in the nemashing, and I didn't want to overdo the swirls. I could have done paisleys, which would kind of mimic the shape of the egg, but then that would take more time. And again, it would compete with the eggs. So I thought in here, just keep the white area simple and just go with the stitching in the ditch around all the embroideries, and then stippling in the background. And then the last but not least, tackle all those dark sashings. And normally I would have reached for like a dark blue thread, or even kind of a really dark purple thread. That would have looked nice in here. But I actually went with a clear invisible thread. I don't know if you can see that. And the reason I did that is I didn't want the thread to show. I wanted the texture to show. And what I like, and then, so the texture, because I was going to have to be really creative about how I quilted this so that I wouldn't, so I could hide all my pleats. I did pleat extensively in these sashings in some areas, and hide like where I would have to, like here's an example. There was so much right here. There's still poofiness there. So, I brought my loops. I did wishbone quilting in this. so that I could have more flexibility with the placement of my wishbones is what I'm getting to. So I use clear thread because the fabric's already a beautiful print and I didn't want to detract from that. And I wanted the fabric to be the focal point, not the thread. So I went with the clear. I didn't use smoke because the clear gives a little bit of a sparkle. And with this happy bright of a quilt, I thought the sparkle would be more appropriate than the dark. Plus, it let me quilt all these little squares at the same time. So I didn't have to change thread and break thread going from one to the next to the next. I could just do it continuously. In fact, this whole sashing I did continuously, except when I ran out of bobbin. But so why did I choose wishbones? Well, in a quilt with this much curvy quilting, with the curves and the stippling and the curves and the nemashing, it's just curves upon curves upon curves. So in a properly pieced quilt, the quilt that lines up nicely and doesn't have a whole lot of fullness, I would have done cross hatching in this dark sashing area, but there's no way in a quilt that was this wonky with this much fullness, this much ruffling, that would have really accentuated all those problems. So in my eyes, I don't know if you can probably see it better at a distance, but in my eyes, wishbones properly spaced kind of mimics cross hatching. You know, that cross where the lines cross in the middle, I mean throughout, just kind of mimics cross hatching. And I really wanted kind of a linear, there you go, more of a linear look for the sashing rather than more curves on top of curves on top of curves. So that's it. This beauty is done. It definitely gave me a chuckle every day that I worked on it. This quilt is about, I want to say 70 by 85, maybe-ish, something along those lines. And it, for the time I put into it, is roughly about 5 cents a square inch. And that's only that high because of it took a lot of time just to line up and deal with the inconsistencies in the piecing. But if you ever get a quilt like this, if you're a free motion quilter, don't shy away from it. Every quilt deserves to be quilted, even the ones that are creatively pieced, because the lady that's getting this back also certainly deserves her beautiful quilt to be quilted, and she will be over the moon happy. Mostly that it's done, because she and this quilt definitely got into a lot of fights. They did not get along. But now they can be happy together. So, again, thank you for watching. Have a good day. Bye-bye.